Yeah, so if we could ask everyone to take seats, please. We are going to get ready to begin. Ask everyone to take seats, please. We have masks. Jeff, can I get a mask, please, for this young lady? Thank you. One young lady's getting a mask.
Yeah. I put some notes together this morning. Don't worry, not going to be much. Yeah, no question about it.
Just in case you need it, I know you know the family very well. Okay. All right. Now, one gentleman's coming in, and then.
Eishes Chayu miyimsa berachok b'pnim michra potach bo le baila b'sholo lo yechzer g'maasu tov v'loira kol yemei chayeha dor shesemer upishtim vatas v'chepetz kapeha pia pascha b'chachma v'saras chesed al lashona tzofia lichos beichso v'lechem atzos lo sochel Kamu baneha vayashrua vaila vayahalala Ravos manosa suchoyo v'atolis al kulana Sheker hachein v'hebel hayofi Isha yiras adonoi hitisalol Tenula b'pri yodeha v'halaluha b'sha'orim ma'aseha. I just want to begin by mentioning that today, of course, is Rosh Chodesh. So we're not going to have what we would traditionally call hespedim eulogies. We'll spend a little time trying to talk a little bit about Paula Bas Rav Yitzchak, Paula Feigenbaum Hashalom, and some things we can learn from her very special life. It's really the end of an era for this mishpacha, for the Feigenbaum mishpacha. It was 28 years ago when Yosef passed away, and now Paula. In this week's parsha, we read V'osu li migdash v'shachanti b'socham. The Torah tells us, the Kodesh Baruch Hu commands us to build the Mishkan, and Hashem will rest His Shechina with them. The Feigenbaum home was such a home where the Shechina was felt, a home that was built on Torah, Yiras Shamayim, Chesed, Hachnasas Orchim. I think our first home that we actually went into when we first came almost 30 years ago was to their home for a delicious dinner. When we first moved in with our family, they invited us over. Come on, you have to have a good meal. You just moved into town. Invite us over for a delicious meal. I won't describe all the details of the meal, but I probably remember them. But the special Achnasas Orchim, the community Achrayas that they had for so many things, Young Israel, Hebrew Academy, they were so involved. Other things, the Feigenbaum family was very involved in the mikveh. A lot of things that went on in the community that they were so much involved in and really were leaders in their own way. Paula ran the home. Yosef was the individual who was involved outside. I remember he was on my search committee when I came for my job. And Paula ran the home. She was the Akeres Habayis. And what a home she ran. Again, it's a home of chesed. She was very meticulous. The chesed, the home, the whole ruach that was in the home was very, very special. Very, very big emphasis on everything that was so important to her. Put two very beautiful families, the Lang Mishpacha, together with the Feigenbaum Mishpacha, and you had so much aristocracy coming out of that home. It was a very special and beautiful home, and you felt it when you were in their home. And Yosef passed away, unfortunately, 28 years ago. A young man left a young almana with 5 single children. And of course, I remember we were all so worried. hopefully we'll be able to get married and move on. And Baruch Hashem, the beautiful nachas that she had with watching all her children get married and marry into beautiful families and create beautiful families. Special bracha that Kodesh Baruch Hu gave them. Shortly after, not that much after Yosef passed away, Paula was diagnosed with MS. I don't remember how many years ago it was, but a long time ago that she was diagnosed with MS, and she lived with it for many, many years. But she was a fighter. She was determined. Whatever she did with her best. Whether it was running her home, whether it was in school, the resource room at the Hebrew Academy, she did it with love. The kids loved her. The staff loved her. She loved them. How many people you know that would work? Resource room is a great place to work where you don't have to prepare as much, right? You're not a teacher day in the day. She worked. She prepared for it. She literally prepared because she wanted to make sure she gave the kids their best. Whatever she could give them was so important to her. That's the kind of person she was. Very determined, very meticulous, very careful about everything she did. Her greatest love was her family, unquestionably. Her children, her grandchildren. Even when they came to visit, even though it was hard and difficult for her, she always made sure to have special snacks that she knew her grandchildren liked. Sometimes some of her guests, myself included, would like. She was that kind of person. She had an open home, and even when things were difficult, but a home where food was available, everything was available, was so special to her. But there's another important lesson that I think we can learn from her life, and that's something that we saw in her children. The kibbud av v'em that the children had, particularly the kibbud aim that they had for their mother, was unreal. Wasn't easy. Paula had a hard life, very hard life, losing a husband at such a young age, and then not being well, and being all alone. But she was never alone. The children were always there, whether it was here on Berkeley, or whether it was in Baltimore when she moved a few years ago, but she was never alone. She always had her family. And then there were times when it wasn't easy, but they were always there for her. And I always say that they had an unbelievable lesson in kibbud av v'em. I've said this over many times. It's a concept that is so foreign to us. But when I first came to Cleveland, I remember when Yosef Olav Shalom and his father Moshe Olav Shalom davened next to each other in Shul, the Academy branch. I can't tell you how many times I saw that when Moshe walked into the room, Yosef stood up. I never saw that before. I never saw that kind of kibbud av v'em. That's the halacha. A father walks into the room, of course you stand up for your father. You stand. We all grew up in yeshiva. The Rebbe walked in the room. You always stood up for your Rebbe. That was a given, right? But I never saw that. But that's the halacha. You have to stand up for a parent. I never saw it. Yosef stood up for his father. It was natural. It's like, that's what you do. It's my father. How do you not stand up? I always tell the story when I was in yeshiva. I had a friend, and I remember whenever it came to going home vacation, he used to have a Shabbos Chanukah, a weekend off between Chanukah and Pesach. Now I think they have 2 or 3. Had a weekend off for yeshiva. And it was a friend of mine. And I remember that whenever it was getting ready to go on, there was a bus that used to go back from Ner Yisrael to New York, that he was wearing a suit. And I went somewhere, I said to him, I said, why are you wearing a suit? Most guys dress down. You go to yeshiva, there's a certain dress code in yeshiva. When you go home, you relax a little bit in your dress code. He looks at me and says, what do you mean? I'm going home to see my parents. How do I not dress accordingly to go see my father and my mother? I was blown away. Going home for Shabbos, it's off weekend. You relax, take off the a little bit more formal garb you wear in yeshiva. And that was the same thing that I saw with Yosef. Yosef taught his family the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em. And the way they were mechabed, again, Yosef, unfortunately, it's been a long time, but the way they were mechabed Paula was something we could all learn from, because it wasn't easy. And there were times when she was in pain, and she wasn't well, and it wasn't always the easiest to take care of her. But they never lost that love, that enthusiasm, that commitment, that Yirah Shamayim of this is how we treat our mother. Tremendous legacy. So we're going to hear from some of the members of the family. And again, keeping in mind that it's Rosh Chodesh, so again, I'm looking at this as the venue to talk about how we could learn lessons that are important for us. These are some of the lessons that I remember: commitment, dedication, love, kibbud v'aim, menschlichkeit, a solid home. V'osuli migdash v'shachanti v'soicham. That was the Feigenbaum home on Berkeley. When we first started, all the years we were here, that I knew them, they lived on Berkeley. Then Paul moved to Baltimore, but that was their home, the home of Osuli Migdash v'shachanti v'soicham, a home which was truly the classic example of what a Yiddish home is all about. Yizir Chobarach, may her memory be a blessing. I want to ask Mechila, in case I didn't treat her properly with respect. I didn't keep up as often as I should. My wife must have spoken to her all the time. Always telling me, I just spoke to Paula. Every once in a while she would remind me, give Paula a call. But I was maybe as good as I should have been about following up. When she was here, sometimes I'd go knocking on her door, go visit her, but when she moved to Baltimore, I think we saw her once or twice when she was living in Baltimore, but I asked Mechila if I wasn't as quick to keep up that very special relationship with her. May she be a Melita Yosher for a beautiful family, for our community, now Baltimore community, all of Klal Yisrael. I have no question that she and Yosef together can go up to the Kisei HaKavod. A lot to be proud of, a lot that they accomplished. Yosef in his not-so-long life, and Paula in her longer but not-so-long life as well. They had a Arichas Yamim, they did not have Arichas Shanim. They didn't live long lives, but they accomplished so much, what they did to their families, Young Israel, Hebrew Academy, and all the other chesed, most of those, and things that they did in the community. May they be Melita Yosher, and may they help Klal Yisrael should go through better times in their schus, and the schus of all their chesed, and all the good things that they did. I'd like to ask Yojo, if he'll say a few words, or Rabbi Feigenbaum. Let's start with Rabbi Feigenbaum. Sorry.
Taking off my mask. Can't speak with the mask. This morning by davening, as we were saying Hallow, it entered my mind, it's a happy day. Rosh Chodesh is a happy day. It's almost unfair that someone like Paula or like others that have a Levaya on Rosh Chodesh. Paula died on Rosh Chodesh, and she's being buried on Rosh Chodesh. It's almost unfair that she can't have a hespedim the way they should be. It's almost unfair that her funeral takes place during the academy winter vacation, but she put so much of her life and Yosef into the academy, and everybody's out of town. It's almost unfair that she should have a small funeral. But I think about it, it was unfair for Moshe Rabbeinu to have a funeral of one. Hashem Yisborach was the only one there for his funeral. He didn't have any pallbearers. Had Hashem Yisborach. By the Kavura, it was Hashem Yisborach, because Hashem Yisborach, he enters into the picture when there's nobody else, or maybe he wants to be involved. So I really feel that when someone has a Levaya on Rosh Chodesh, it's not that it's unfair. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it that way because he wants to say the hesped. He wants to deliver the eulogy. And I think in this case, for those of us who knew Paula, there was so much about her that only Hashem knew. I have to correct her by Bernstein. It was 29 years ago. Based upon Tzvi's bar mitzvah, it was 29 years ago, and Shira turned 10 during the Shiva. I stood here 29 years ago in the other room, and I was maspid my friend Yosef. And I have some very strong memories from that day. But as we were walking out to go to the cars, there were two men there from Young Israel, wonderful people, and one said to the other, those poor kids, that poor mother, you have to write them, you have to almost write them off because how are they going to grow up like that? A mother who was a young widow, 5 young children, and who's going to take, the world is the way it is. You have to fend for yourself. But they didn't know Paula. They didn't know Paula. Paula was a relentless, unflaggable fighter. Nothing stopped Paula. Paula did not look for acclaim, did not look for attention, but she was behind everything. She had Mimi, who was busy saving the world, but she had to marry her off. Mordechai had to go to yeshiva. Tzvi just had his bar mitzvah. Aviva had to graduate high school and go to seminary. Shira was a little girl. I think I got everybody, right? And she had to do this all by herself because for those of you that knew Yosef, was a powerhouse. Was a powerhouse. He would sit at academy board meetings and he took over because that was Yosef. And Paula remained in the background. But background does not mean that she did not have power. The Aron HaKodesh is housed houses the Sefer Torah. The Aron HaKodesh is the premier keli in the Mishkan. Why? Because it houses the Torah. Sometimes when you're ancillary to something, where you're behind the curtain, you have the same cheshivas, the same significance, the same importance as the special thing that you're behind. The Mizbeach was 3 amas high. The Balei Tosfos say that the 3 amas were by design. Each amma was for one of the 3 redeemers of Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu, Aharon HaKohen, and the oldest one, Miriam. While we understand Moshe Rabbeinu and Aharon HaKohen, Miriam was not the redeemer. Where was Miriam? The answer is, Chaim Zaychik says, without Miriam there would be nobody. Miriam was the one that stood up to Amram when he divorced Yocheved. And she said, your decree is worse than the decree of Paro. And he took Yocheved back, and Moshe Rabbeinu was conceived. When Moshe Rabbeinu was born, Miriam stood in the background and watched to protect him. That's a perfect description of Paula. But Paula didn't always stay in the background. She was an advocate for her children. Oh, was she an advocate? For her students, for the school, for the shul. She was an advocate for anybody but herself. Chazal tell us that a Gaver Rabbah is someone who thinks of others first. I think the same thing applies to Nisha Chashuva, which what Paula was, Nisha Chashuva. A person who devoted her life completely to her family, to her city, to her community. I guess Hashem Yisborach will finish off the Hesped.
Your son-in-law, Yojo.
Pasuk in Mishlei says, "Shema b'ni musar avicha v'al titosh Torah simecha." I think that pasuk is very apropos for my mother-in-law. There There are different people in life. You have people that are like, things are a little more questionable, a little gray. And then you have people that they're rock solid. And this is what you do. And there's no wavering from what you believe the right thing is, what is your Messiah, what it means to be part of a shul, what it means to be part of a community, what family means. And that's really what I saw with my mother-in-law. That was her mahalach. There's challenges when you think about things more. I know my friend Michael Berkowitz was telling me once that how did people have the power, the koyach to keep Shabbos many years ago in America when it was hard and people were losing their jobs. Many of those that were successful were the ones that had a very simple, this is what you do. They're not necessarily thinking deep into it. This is the right thing. And even if you lose your job, like that's what has to happen. And that's really everything we saw with my mother-in-law was very much like these are things that are meant to be. This is the way a family should be. This is what school is. This is what is meant to be. It was a real strength with this approach, was a tremendous koyach and a power to raise a family, raise 5 kids, and without losing her husband Nebuch, and then fighting through a lifetime of suffering with MS and definitely the last few months, very terrible illness, a lot of pain. I asked Aviva just to share a few things, a few stories, and to really, and this is the point I was thinking, and Aviva brought out a very similar point. And I know, I'm told that in the academy on Rosh Chodesh you didn't have to wear the uniforms. So I think in the Feigenbaum home, they bought special clothing for Rosh Chodesh. That was the thing. We're going to take this. There was always generously hosting company, and I think that someone would come for Shabbos, stay Matzah Shabbos, stay till Sunday, Monday, whatever it needs to be. If there's a simcha, how could we be mechazik it? I think something that comes up in the house that maybe I had a hard time appreciating was when it came to Aseret Yemei Tshuva, not having nuts, not baking. It was like hardcore. This is the Messiah. We're going to make. There were certain cakes. It wasn't honey cake, but it was certain cakes without nuts in the recipe, because that was the Messiah. That's the way she did it in her house, and that's the way she was gonna. That's why she was gonna do it as well. We once were asking our Rav about covering the counters for Pesach, and Aviva was doing like this double covering, and I don't know why, but I was thinking it wasn't necessary. And the Rav looked at us and he said, "This is what your mother did. This is what she grew up with. It's so beautiful that do the double covering. If that's what she did in the house. Shema b'ni Musa avicha ve'al titash Torah simecha. It's that strength. It's that consistency that she brought day in and day out." So we as a family, all the kids tried very hard to host and take care of her. And I know that I want to ask Mechila for me on behalf of the family that at times we definitely did not give the proper kavod. We tried, but we didn't give the proper kavod. So I hope you Michael, me, and the family should be a Melitzi Shar.
Son Mordechai.
Once again, it's a tall order very difficult for me to straddle both sides of the fence, to be sensitive to the halachas of Rosh Chodesh while giving the proper kavod achron. As the Rav mentioned, we'll try to go through a few things that at least we could learn from my mother. I have to say that certainly in this setting in Cleveland, it's a little bit more difficult than yesterday to make sure that we stay within the framework of the halacha, and please don't take a certain toned down of emotion to represent any lack of sadness. Rather, it's just we have to keep the halacha, and in this setting, it's certainly amongst people, friends, close friends who knew my mother. I'll have to try a little bit harder. But on that note, still, I'm asking that my mother should please be Michael. I know that this is the way you would have wanted it, that we shouldn't say too much anyways. But there's a lot that will have to remain unsaid. One of the things that Mami always taught us was Hakaras HaTaiv. She was busy with it all the time. Anytime someone did something for her, she would want to be Makar Taiv. She would want to send them something for Shabbos. Up until her very last days, there was a doctor that visited her a few times in the hospital in Baltimore. It wasn't her doctor, but worked in that hospital, tried to help her out, and she was saying like, oh, someone has to bring him something for Shabbos. She told me, don't worry, Aviva said she's going to bring him something for Shabbos. And that was something that was very important to her. And on that note, I think that it's important for me to begin, and this is how I think she would want me to begin, by being Makar Taiv to the many people in Cleveland that have helped her out. I know I'm going to leave people out if I list people by name. There are many people who are here, and there are many people who perhaps are watching from other places or listening from other places. But so we're grateful to Rabbi Bernstein for coming back in, for arranging everything, and for everything he's done for us over the years. And we're very grateful to Lisa Shabbos for more than I could even I could speak 1,000 years. I wouldn't know what to say. And there are many other names that I couldn't mention. It's just I'm going to end up leaving people out. But there are many people in this room, and people who are not in this room, that spent a tremendous amount of effort, time, kaiches mesiras nefesh, taking care of my mother in the way that they would take care of their own family. Many visits over Shabbos, many trips to hospitals, doctor's appointments, people that helped her get in and out of school, get to and from school, people that helped her with the many challenges that she had right after my father was nifter. Are too numerous it's too numerous to explain. As Rabbi Feigenbaum mentioned, Hashem knows who did what. And but certainly my mother would want us to be makar taiv to each and every single one of you, including the ones that that are too numerous to mention, or that the many things that we don't even know of what you've done. I have to mention that we're makar taiv to the Hebrew Academy, to the administration there, to all the people who work there. The Hebrew Academy was a major part of her life, and as much as I'll speak later about how much she gave to the Hebrew Academy, but certainly they went out of their way to make it that it was a comfortable place for her to work, and a place where she was able to fulfill what she felt was her mission of teaching children. Certainly, of the many things that we as children are makar taiv for, it's difficult for a child to thank a parent, but she instilled within us a very special love for mitzvahs and yantif, chashivas for yantif, chashivas for raising a home for building a home, according to Torah, for building a home with a focus on the children, that the children should be successful, for building a home that the focus, that there should be an involvement in the community. As was mentioned, she stood behind my father's involvement in everything. She was at home while taking care of us while my father was attending the many meetings in school, in the shul, mikvah, kashrus, long before there was something called a cell phone. I remember when we had to get a second line in our house because when he became president of Young Israel, and there was it was understood that he's going to have to be on the phone with people, and our teenage daughters that have to be on the phone with people. But that was nowadays it's hard for us to imagine what that but that was a big deal. But it was just a similar dover about his involvement. Mami, you raised us. You took your time to do homework with us. You said many times that through third grade I really didn't know much of what I learned in school, and that every single night you sat with me and went over the Chumash until something clicked. The challenge of sending away children to yeshiva as an 8th grade Rebbe, I could tell you, is difficult for every single mother. In normal circumstances, it's challenging, but certainly after Daddy was nifter, there was no question that I should just go back to yeshiva. People ask me, why don't you just go learn in Telz? Like, that would be the natural thing. Your father was nifter, stay in Cleveland, but I was being successful. I was already being matzliach in Eretz Yisrael, and she had no question in her mind that I was going straight back right afterwards. And it was Mesiras Nefesh for her. It was Mesiras Nefesh for my siblings, but that was her attitude always. We're going to do what's best for the children. We're going to make sure that they shouldn't be looked at as any different than everyone else. We're going to make sure that they have what they need so that they should become fully successful people. There are many lessons that we've learned from you. Certainly to persevere during difficult times, to push yourself when things are hard for us. We have to learn from Mami that we should push ourselves. We watched you push yourself to go teach. We watched you push yourself to get there, to get into the building, to get down the stairs, back up the stairs, and you never stopped. You never gave up. You never gave up, and that's something that we have to learn in our own lives. As things got more and more difficult for you, you still never gave up. I remember watching you bench. The children all watched her bench slowly. It was difficult for her to say the words and to see the words. Over the recent years, it took her longer than everyone else to bench. I remember watching you try to lift your hand to kiss the mezuzah before you went to sleep at night, when you couldn't even lift it so high, and when you could barely have the strength to bring your hand to her face. She would still try to bring her hand to her face to say Kriya Shema. There is a Gemara that says that David HaMelech once found himself in a situation where he felt that he has no mitzvahs around him. He's looking around and there was no mitzvah that he was involved in at the moment that he was doing, and the Gemara says that he took comfort that at least he had a bris milah, he had that mitzvah to take with him. The thought crossed my mind at the very end that we're grateful to Hashem that all the children surrounded my mother, B'shas Petira, we were all there. And I think that is for sure zchus to all the efforts that she put into us, that she had us all there at that time. And I was thinking, it's a time where she's bare of mitzvahs. What does she have with her at that moment? But I thought to myself that there's one mitzvah that she was still doing at that moment. She was wearing her snood. She was covering her hair. And it's something that, a mitzvah that nowadays we take for granted, but she was careful about her entire life. She was consistent about it, and something that we could learn from. long before it was as fashionable to be careful about this mitzvah. She was always careful about it. We know that Mommy was always a giver. She wanted so badly to give to everyone. She wanted to be involved in everyone's simchas, to send over a chocolate cake and a kugel whenever they made a simcha, whenever there was something going on somewhere else. She wanted to be able to host, to take care of others. And I think that of all the difficulties that she went through, the thing that she often expressed was that she found herself on the other side of the giving. She always wanted to be a giver and not a taker. And that made it even more difficult for her to have to come out to others, to ask anyone else for help. I don't know how Hashem runs the world, but certainly Hashem wants there to be chesed in the world. And in order for there to be chesed in the world, there needs to be a giver and there needs to be a taker. And perhaps, Mommy, even though you spent part of your life being a taker, you certainly didn't choose to be a taker. You chose to be a giver. You chose to be a giver, and that's what you tried to do all the time. And Hashem arranged it that through you there was still a lot of giving, even when you had to be on the taking side. But there was a tremendous amount of giving, especially in this community. Those who took care of you, those who visited you, those who, as we mentioned before, and perhaps we still have a schus in that. She had a passion for teaching. She had a passion for. Rabbi Eli Dessler was here before. He mentioned to me that that the Hebrew Academy is grateful for the hundreds, perhaps thousands of children that she impacted throughout her many years there. I don't remember the exact number of how many years she taught there. My sisters would know. 37 years. 37 years that she taught children. 34 years. Okay, to teach for 34 years. And to do it with each child that she had in mind, the joy that she had being able to prepare a child to be able to say the Manishtana smoothly at a Seder, to be proud to be able to read Chumash, to translate properly, was something that I'm very makar tov that she taught us that importance, and certainly in my teaching, some of that passion that she had towards teaching certainly had a major impact on me. She was extremely consistent in everything, and we could learn for her to be consistent when things are hard, when things aren't hard, but she was consistent, everything at a set time. There were 2 times a week that we knew that we couldn't call her, or we couldn't get through to her, because those 2 times a week she had a set times that she would call her mother, my Bobby, who's listening right now in New York. She was extremely dedicated to her, even though she was far away. And many of the lessons and many of the life that she led was certainly a product of her parents. And we ask Hashem to bring Bobby and Nechama. We feel as a family, Kilu Kinu B'chiflayim. We were recently hit with the patir of my grandfather and now my mother. And Hashem should help that Hashem should only bring Bobby nachas and simchas from here on. She certainly was very proud of you, Bobby, and she was always very proud to say that in all the years she never said Yizkar. And now still she never said Yizkar. When she sat Shiva at home, she had a picture of Bobby and Zadie next to her, and she was so proud to show it to everyone, that she had parents who grew up from in America that raised her the way they did. I'd like to again say a few words to the grandchildren. My 6-year-old daughter said to my wife yesterday, when my wife was trying to explain to her what's going on, and said to explain how to explain to a 6-year-old that Bobby's gone. She said that she's going to be in a better place. She's going to be in a place where she'll be very happy. And Tzipora, my 6-year-old daughter, said to her, how could she be happy if she's not with us? Because even the 6-year-old knew that what made her happiest was being with her grandchildren. You were her pride and joy. You were her reason to keep pushing to live. She was proud of you, and every single one of you knew that she was proud of you, and looked for ways to bring out that pride, looked for ways to try to tell her that you did something, that you were successful on a test that she studied for you with, to make her smile. And there's a tremendous void now that we're all going to feel, especially the grandchildren. And I ask that every time that you feel that void and you think, where's Bobby? You should know that you should keep up what you're doing to make her proud, keep steiging in Torah and mitzvahs in your Shemaim. And together with my father, they're still smiling down at you and very proud of everything that you're doing. Again, we'd like to ask Mechila, Mami, if there were ever, for all the times that perhaps that we didn't treat you with the proper dignity, with the proper kavod, or didn't speak nicely to you, if there was ever anything that we did that could have that hurt you or said, or anything that we could have done better to take better care of you, you should please be mindful of us. You should be a Meilitz Yosher. You should go up to the Kisei HaKavod together with Daddy. Be a Meilitz Yosher for Bobby, for Uncle Shali, for Aunt Chayla, for all the children and grandchildren. Everyone has their own challenges, and now you're fully aware of what they are. You should be a Meilitz Yosher for the entire family.
Sunday. It's not easy ever to speak about one's parents, especially 2 days in a row. So much has been said. Sorry if I repeat some things. We all know one of the highlights of my mother is on Rosh Chodesh, to try to speak things we can learn from, is the way she put her everything into doing all the mitzvahs. The Hakdama, the Sefer HaChinuch, the Mechaber, who we don't know who the Mechaber of the Sefer HaChinuch was, writes that the whole purpose for writing the Sefer HaChinuch, which has become one of the legendary Sfarim throughout the generations, was to give his son and his friends something to do on a Shabbos afternoon. That was the purpose of him writing the Sefer HaChinuch, a special limud for a Shabbos afternoon. Growing up in our home, Shabbos was such a special time. Mordechai Touch spoke about it. Everything was for special Shabbos treats. There was never a Shabbos without a special cake being baked. Never could have been bought, had to be baked in the home. There's special toys for Shabbos afternoon, only be taken out on Shabbos. Special Shabbos clothes, special Yontif clothes. That instilling that there's a specialness to the Shabbos, that it's different than the rest of the week. And Yontif is different. She had, particularly here in Cleveland, a tremendous amount of relationships. She had relationships with so many of her friends who are here, so many who are listening from afar, and she cherished every single one of those relationships. I would speak to her numerous times during the week, sometimes even daily, and it was always about who she spoke to that day, who came to see her that day, who she had lunch with that week. And she really, really had tremendous hakar satov for each and every time anyone did anything for her. And as Mordechai said, there's so many times she'd ask me to call the candy store to order a platter or a small dish for the children, if people came to visit her, whether it was a Shabbos afternoon or during the week. It was just tremendous hakar satov that she had. The relationship, I think, she may have cherished the most, and she bragged about the most to us, her children, was the one she had with her parents. Bobby, Zadiel, Shalom, she cherished that fact that every Sunday morning and Thursday evening was the time that she'd speak to you. We knew we couldn't call then. We knew that she would brag that Rosh Hashanah, she had two parents, and they were living by themselves. Bobby took care of Zadie with all her heart. And
that they set the tone for everything that she did. She would talk about how she was raised in a time that wasn't necessarily popular to send children from schools, and this year's the nefesh that Bobby and Zadie had to make sure that happened. There are, of course, many thank yous that have to be said. As Mordechai said, you have Young Israel and the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland are two that, and definitely top the list. Her life, when she moved to Baltimore, she would tell me numerous times she didn't miss her house after she settled in. She didn't miss her house. She loved her apartment. She was close to her children, her grandchildren. She missed her friends. She missed all of you tremendously, to see you. But the thing she missed most was teaching in the academy. She missed being able to help children, being able to see them grow and thrive. I mentioned yesterday, a friend of mine came over to me a few years ago, I hadn't seen in many years, and he told me I could read Hebrew because of your mother. He told me that mommy learned with him for 4 or 5 years straight in the Hebrew Academy, in the resource room, before it was popular to be a reading specialist, and that's what she did. I mentioned she would spend her summers more times preparing. She knew many of the students she had coming up, and she would make special games for them and cut out things and order prizes for them in order to help them be as successful as possible. I mentioned yesterday the Chizkuni, today in Parshas Vayishlach. The pasuk Parshas Vayishlach mentions all the Bnei Yaakov, and then it says, Il Yaakov sheyildu b'Padan Aram. But these are the children of Yaakov that were born in Padan Aram. And many of the Farshim say Binyamin was not born in Padan Aram. Binyamin was born in Eretz Canaan. So the Chizkuni explains that the beginning of Binyamin was after Yosef was born. Rachel says immediately, Yosef li Hashem ben acher. Hashem should give me another son. Rashi explains, and the Farshim explain, that she knew that she was going to have one more child to round out the Shvatim, and she started diving right there for Binyamin, and therefore it's as if Binyamin was born in Padan Aram. My mother was always very careful. Well, I said yesterday we were a product of 3800 Berkeley. She would never let us forget, not just of 3800 Berkeley, but the town that surrounded it. They say it takes a town to raise a child, and I think as siblings, we all makir tov to the city of Cleveland, Young Israel, Hebrew Academy in particular, for everything they did for us, and my mother for so many years. To her grandchildren, to say that you're a pride and joy is quite an understatement. Not a conversation went by where she didn't ask me how each of you were doing, what you were up to, how school, yeshiva, camp, what your plans were. She was actually getting a little nervous. The other week I told her that Yossi and I signed up for Bike for Chai again, and she started getting, oh my gosh, you could do it again. I was in the accident last year while training for it. I was in a serious accident. And she said to me, but Yosef will be with you, right? She said, yeah. She said, but Yosef will take care of you. I said, yeah, Yosef's a better biker than I am. He's younger. But her concern, the fact that she knew that's something that he loved doing, she said, you're crazy, you're going to bike 100 miles, 150 miles, you're crazy. I said, yeah, that's nothing changed. But she immediately went back to it because Yosef's happy doing it. That's why it was okay for me to do. Not because it was okay for me to do, but because Yosef was happy doing it. So therefore it was okay for me to do. Your accomplishments were her accomplishments, and it's something that when you walked into her apartment, the first thing she pointed out to people was a picture on the wall, Yosef, from your bar mitzvah in particular, where the last time she had all her grandchildren together, her whole family together. She blew it up for her on tremendous canvas. And when they walked into her apartment, she pointed out to each of her grandchildren, she said who they were, whose children they were, what they were up to. And that's something that she showed tremendous joy in. Mommy, on behalf of me and praising the children, as for all times we did not do for you like we could, like we should. Up here with Daddy, you should look down at us, be Milas Yosher, for us, for Bobby, for Chaim, for Uncle Shelly, for your entire family.
Okay, Yossi Morgenstern, grandson.
first thing that came up when I think of my grandmother, I have a lot of good memories at our house. She really, I felt that every time I was there, she really cared about me. She really, she really was happy to see me. The first thing that comes to my mind, that the last time I saw her, I remember we had an ice cream party together a week ago. And I came into the house, and then I felt like she perked up. You know, I've never seen her that miserable before. But as soon as I walked in, she was so happy to see me, so happy to, hear how I was doing. It really, she was a really special person. And she went through a lot, but I don't know, she was a really big inspiration for me. Yeah. Bobby, I know when I was a little boy, I caused quite the ruckus at your house. I think we even, but I'm really happy that when I got older, I felt like I was able to have quite a connection with you. You know, we had our roast every time you came to our house. We made the roast. We really enjoyed that. That was like a big part of your achnasas orchim. That's what I learned from you. You make a special thing for when people come over. Anyways, I want to ask Mechila, like I mentioned, we could have, treated you with more respect. I hope you're meichel me.
Joseph Paula Feigenbaum, my grandson.
I'm not just speaking for myself, I'm speaking on behalf of all the grandchildren. And as was mentioned, it's Trish Chaydish, so I'm supposed to say Zecharinis that are on the happier side of things. And as a grandchild, that job is a lot easier for me. The first thing that comes to mind, and I think to all our grandchildren, the first thing that comes to mind is going to Bobby's house for the Yom Tovim, which was, of course, something we always looked up for. And it meant being endlessly spoiled for a week. Her house was a grandchild's wonderland. It was a week of limitless chocolate, ice cream, cookies, ice cream. And the whole house was just full. There was tons of toys, Legos, books, and it was endless. The word generous when it comes to when she would spoil her grandchildren is an understatement. All the Hanukkah gelt, the trips to the pizza store, the candy store, whenever she would come into Baltimore, it was mamish endless. A lot of times when when we would come down in the morning, there was always a routine, a schedule for sure. She would have her breakfast, and a lot of times before she even asked if she had breakfast, she would ask us if we had our chocolate yet, our daily chocolate. But she didn't just spoil us endlessly, but we were able to tell, and it was very clear that she loved doing it. She was so proud of it, and we knew she would love doing this because she loved us so much, and she was so proud of us, as was mentioned. She just wanted us to see us freely eat ice cream and like nothing else existed because she loved us so much. She was so proud of learning chumash with everyone, which she basically knew by heart. She was so proud of teaching them, the granddaughters that is, how to bake, which she also knew all the recipes by heart and where everything is, and which was also done so meticulously. Another thing that comes to mind from a grandchild's perspective of coming to her house was a certain properness that I don't find so much that her house represented. Like, for example, when we he would always come the living room in the front. It took me a long time to understand what it meant that there's chairs and a couch that you're not allowed to sit on, but it represented a certain menschlichkeit, a certain regalness that the whole house had. Everything was masuder, everything had its place, everything was run with a schedule. I could almost list off the entire Friday or Erev Yontif, the checking the clocks, and you have to do this and take care of that, and it was the same thing time and time again, over and over again. And it taught me, and I think all the grandchildren, a certain menschlichkeit, a certain way to hold oneself and way to be masuder and presentable. Whenever I would talk to her and I would start talking like fast and say a lot of Yiddish and made up yeshivish words, she'd always stop me and slow me down and make sure I spoke correctly. And I would ask her like my hi, it's okay, and she would always say that it's not how you present yourself, it's not proper. She would about how things were run and how things were kept on schedule and very, very masuder were also something that we learned a lot. Things have to be organized. Even though a lot of times we weren't so good at keeping things organized, but the way she would just sit the Erev Yontif or the whole, anytime we were there, she would sit in her chair in the kitchen, just running the entire house was also something just amazing. How she could upstairs, downstairs, wherever in the entire house anybody was, she was controlling the whole thing, saying that you do this and you have to do that and bake this, and even without moving, she was still running the whole show. You
want your hold on to it. We will not recite the Kilmali Rachmim because it's Rosh Chodesh, so we'll now move on to the cemetery. The burial will be at the Young Israel section of Zion Memorial Park. The family will be sitting Shiva for a few hours today, actually at our home, which is 23794 Wendover Drive, till approximately 2:30. We'll be davening mincha at some point between and coming back from the cemetery and 2:30. They will be continuing to sit Shiva at the home of the Morgan Stearns in Baltimore. The times and minyanim, I don't think we know yet, but they'll send it out. Anybody who's traveling down there will know. Okay.
We'll take you on. We'll get the pallbearers are going to be taken someplace else, and we'll bring the orange to you.
What did she say?
No. What? Well, you won't be. We're going to take the orange out now. Only two of them, and they can't fit six through the door. Okay.
Oh, we have to take turns. It's a very small door. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
The family wants to carry it.
You're going to carry it from here? You're not going to be able to make the turn, not just two people. She's very heavy.
Can we go out a different door?
No, because of where the hearse is. No.
The hearse is on this side.
Yeah. If you want to carry, here's what we're going to do. I'll tell you what. You don't want to roll it off?
Why don't we move the hearse?
Can we move the hearse? You really want to have the mitzvah carrying it?
All right. Give me 1 minute.
This is this side is right. Okay. Who's your Eli? He just gave a very good shir by the gathering for all the alumni when you were off.
We're moving the hearse. All right. Where did Brian go? Mike, where are you for a moment? Open these. Can we push this back a little bit? Well, and that's the way it's going to be.
All right, we'll push
All right, pallbearers, if you will turn the orange, so that this is Rose here, so you want to go out feet first. So you're going to turn the orange. Get who's ever going to carry. There's a beer there, be careful. We need more help. If anyone else is helping, please.
Are you okay with this? Yeah, you okay?
Okay, you'll be better off if you move back, if you move to the side. If we could have on each side, it would be better. We're going to come out this way. Everyone return to their cars. If you're driving to the cemetery, so start your car. Put your headlights on. Well, that's